everyone. Welcome back to Misconceptions. I am so honored to have Gila Block joining us today. Gila, thank you for saying yes to this conversation.
Of course, I'm so honored to have been asked and to be able to have it with you.
So I would say that Gila was probably in many ways my entree into the infertility world as a professional, having done the trainings, but then had the opportunity to work in consultation with Yesh Tikva, which is an organization that supports people dealing with infertility and other kind of reproductive challenges. We'll get more into the conversation about Yesh Tikva, but I would like to start really with you, Gila, and what kind of brought you to this work. So let's begin. First of all, welcome to Misconceptions and tell us a little bit about your professional self. Who are you?
Professional self. Ooh, wonderful question. I run, as you mentioned, an organization called Yesh Tikva. I had the honor of co-founding it with Ali Solomon, and what we do is we provide emotional support and education around reproductive health and infertility for Jewish individuals, couples, grandparents in waiting, through this treacherous, at times, journey to building one's dream family. And what we've learned over the years is that though at the heart and core of who we support are the individuals going through that, through infertility, there's a ripple effect of infertility that impacts family, friends, community. And so we work to create both support for the ripples as well as education on how they can lean in and support the individuals and couples at the center of it.
Yeah, I think that that's one of the things that to highlight is this idea that fertility challenges or infertility is something that really is a family systems matter, right? It's not typically experienced in isolation. I think about the communal implications, the individual implications, the family implications. It's not only in private. And that's actually what makes it probably a little bit complicated. But let's start a little bit more about your personal self. Thank you for sharing your professional self. Take us back in time. Tell us where you grew up and what brought you to this conversation.
100%. Okay, so I grew up in Los Angeles. And when my husband and I, or how far back do you want me actually to go? I
You
can
can
start
wherever
my
you want.
fertility journey or
I'm not sure I really want to know who your kindergarten teacher is, but we can just
uh,
start with your fertility. You got married. As far as you knew, were there any challenges ahead of you related to fertility?
no, we were young. We were in our early 20s when we got married. Um, the world was our oyster essentially, and we were told that when we were ready to have a family, it should be quite easy. So much so that we'd been married for a few months, and I went to see my first OB. And I remember voicing concern because it had been a few months already. And her response to me was, "Oh, you're young. You'll be back within the next 3 months pregnant." And I remember how, firstly, in that moment, it was like just like I'm expressing a concern, like at least validate it. Like, yes, infertility does occur. You're young. We have no reason to believe that you're going to fall into that statistic. But if you do, like one day, I'm here for you. We'll have the conversation. We'll cross the bridge when we have to. I think it was just even, and it could be that she was a unique OB, who discredited this kind of little voice in my head that was starting to perk up and say this is going to be challenging. But I think that that's the notion. If you're young, it'll happen. And clearly that was not my reality. Hence, we're having this conversation. And within a few months after that, we got our initial diagnosis of unexplained infertility. And so essentially, something's wrong, but science has no clue what. So, yeah.
Did you wait a year? I mean, we know that the typical, diagnosis of infertility comes after 1 year of actively trying to conceive. And did you wait that full year or you were prepared to go for intervention or like kind of a diagnosis prior to the year? Like, was that
Yeah.
concern honored for you?
So we went in for diagnosis around 11 months.
Hmm.
It was, as far as they were concerned, close enough to a year of trying, with nothing to show for it. And so we started the diagnostic process around 11 months and were diagnosed within a year of trying.
Right.
And I think that part of it, for me at least, and I think that for a lot of people that I've spoken to over the years, is that we're fed this notion that as soon as you start trying, you should get pregnant pretty quickly because we're told that if you don't want to get pregnant, you need to very rigorously prevent it because it happens so easily. So I think that this notion that it could and likely will take up to 12 months feels like an crazy long amount of time when we're told this concept of like, don't blink or you'll get pregnant. So for me, even around a 9 month mark, I was already starting to get very nervous. And I think that had it been framed for me earlier, like under 35, if you don't have any known red flags, up to 12 months is a very normal amount of time for it to take. And
Right.
a lot of people take the full 12 months to get pregnant, and that's not infertility if you're under 35 and you have no known red flags, obviously, if you're not ovulating regularly, or if you have other.
Like other medical issues.
Exactly.
Right.
PCOS, endometriosis diagnoses, like obviously you don't need to wait that 12 months. Go
Right.
speak to a doctor from day one.
Right.
But for those who do not have any other known, 12 months is very normal.
Hmm.
And so that definitely was for us something that I wish would have been framed a little differently from the beginning. So we got our diagnosis, and we began treatment in like typical, do a couple IUIs because that's where you start. And at the time, and it bothers some people when I say this, but it very, to me, like really encapsulates who I was then. I was a victim of infertility. Infertility was happening to me. I did
Mm.
not know what to do with it. I very much embodied woe is me. The rest of the world gets to have what I don't have, and I'm being hurt by infertility. And I didn't understand infertility. I wasn't able to educate myself around it quite yet, nor was anyone offering education at the time around reproductive health and infertility. And so I was really at the disposal of whatever my doctor told me to do, and that's what happened. Whether I understood why or not, whether I agreed with it or not, I think that had my educated self of today been diagnosed with infertility, I would have had a very real conversation with my doctor about starting with so many IUIs, and
Right.
if that was the best course of treatment, statistically speaking, with my diagnosis. Um,
So
and
can we
so,
talk to let's take a minute because I want to explore that idea of like we got a diagnosis, right? But at the same time, you said we got a diagnosis of unexplained infertility. I think
right.
people need to understand what that means. So like, can we talk a little bit through about what from what you remember, as much as you
Yeah.
choose to share, what kind of things do you go through in order to determine actually we have no idea why this is happening, but we also don't have any idea why it's happening. Meaning like we don't know, we don't have concrete evidence as to, oh, this is the reason. And therefore, we acknowledge that this is the diagnosis of infertility, but we don't have any really cause or specific thing to pin it on. Talk a little bit about what that process was of diagnosis.
So the process of diagnosis was the process of elimination. There are known reasons that infertility occur. We have tests to test for those, including hormone levels, so blood work, ultrasound, um, doing um, a what's it called? An HC, no, HSG. I always confuse HSG and HC.
Hysterosonogram.
Yes.
Hmm.
To make sure that your tubes aren't blocked, that you are ovulating, that you are ovulating enough follicles in each cycle, and all those tests were done and came out, and also obviously a male factor, sperm, um, what's it called? A
Sperm
sperm test.
testing, right?
Thank you. And between all of the testing, nothing came back with any indication that anything was wrong, which then kind
Right.
of leads you through the process of elimination. Well, inherently, it's been 12 months, so you have infertility. So now we
Right.
just need to determine what's causing it. And if none of the known factors that we know about are causing it, therefore you have infertility because we're not telling you you don't. Because after 12 months, you automatically it is infertility. But we just science yet does not yet have an explanation as to what is causing your
Hmm.
infertility.
And I just want to acknowledge also that, like, if you think about the testing that men and women have to go through, the difference in testing, there's very minimal testing available for men. There's also very minimal treatment, but very minimal testing in men. And basically, we're looking at the quality, the quantity, the shape, right, of the sperm, that it's there, right, that we actually have something to work with. For women, there's so many different variations and variables related to what could be going wrong. Endometrial tissue, aligning issues, timing issues, ovulation issues, like hormone issues. There's so many pieces. And yet we can still, with all of that information, there's still so much we don't understand about conception,
Yeah.
right? Yeah. So
Um,
when
and
you're, yeah, go ahead.
and I think that there are things that we do understand that are just too invasive to test for. So there is a lot of research being done onto what level of um, unexplained infertility actually is silent endometriosis, in
Mm,
which you're asymptomatic of endometriosis, and therefore we're not going to go in and be aggressive in terms of diagnostic process because it includes a very aggressive
surgery.
diagnostic.
Right.
So therefore, um, I think that science does have more answers that we don't always need to look for because the assumption is the treatment's going to be the same.
Right. Exactly. Exactly. There
But
isn't
again,
much we can do
not
otherwise.
again.
Right.
I am not a medical professional, so obviously people should
Right.
research
Right.
that and
Right.
ask their own doctors. But I do think that there is more available to science that we don't always necessarily need to tap into because why
There's not
go
much we
that
could do.
extra mile of
Yeah.
invasive?
I think we're coming to that conclusion as well in infertility for male factor infertility, where we're beginning. I just remember that we just recently had a conference with it's called the Jones Infertility Conference, and there's conversation about how we're kind of getting a much better understanding of that older male sperm, right? So older
Yeah.
sperm is actually impacting not only conception, but actually possibly is impacting, fetal development. And that was something that we never really had much evidence to consider, that like there is a question of like how old is too old for a male sperm to conceive and and to consider, like, is there an implication of how old is the father? It used to be like, well, men are fertile for the rest of their lives, or pretty
Right.
late into it, right?
Yeah.
And I think I know that we're finding evidence that that's not true. So we know there's so many things we just don't know. Let's go back to the things we did know. I love this conversation that you were leading us down in terms of experiencing it as a victim. Could we
Yeah.
talk a little bit more about why your brain went to this is happening to me and I am a victim versus like this is just something that we're going to have to navigate together as a couple. This is going to be
Yeah.
hard, this is going to be emotionally difficult, but this is happening to both of us together, perhaps. Tell me a little bit more about the victim perspective.
For me at least, I think it stemmed from this notion that infertility doesn't happen to people. There wasn't this concept in my mind in how I was educated, and I was very mainstream educated. I didn't lack for understanding of science, and just no one spoke about it. So infertility was something that obviously in the back of my head I knew happened, but it didn't happen to anyone I knew.
Hmm.
And therefore, if it's happening to me and everyone else around me is able to have, then what's wrong with me? And therefore, in my mind, that went to I'm now victim of circumstance. And I definitely 1,000,000% would approach it differently today with all the knowledge that I have. And in the middle of my journey, it did shift as I became more knowledgeable of the reality of infertility. And I think that's a big piece of the education that is so important to what we do at Yesh Tikva is that the more we speak about, the more we understand, the less it's happening to you and more it happens. And therefore, this is what's available. These are the treatment courses that you have. You're a partner with your doctor.
Hmm.
In choosing what happens, they don't get to tell you what to do. They get to suggest, and you get to have a conversation together and determine what the next best step and course of action is. And obviously, in doing that, you're choosing a doctor that you trust so that when they do recommend a course of action, before you consent to it being done, you know that whatever course of action they're recommending, you're going to trust.
Hmm.
Um,
Hmm.
and that when you learn about things along the way that your doctor may not be offering or recommending, you have a thought partner to say, listen, um, you're obviously the expert in this. You went to school, you're doing this regularly. I heard of X, Y, and Z that a friend of mine did, or I read an article about X, Y, and Z. Is there a reason we're not doing it? Or could we consider doing it? And then it's this partnership that opens up and says, well, oh, that's a wonderful thought. Yeah, maybe we could try this version of that because it's not identical to what you're going through, but we can incorporate a piece here. Or science shows that what you're asking for is actually just one more thing that you get to throw at the possibility of, but there's no conclusive research to show
Mm.
that it is more. And that, I think that's the process that becoming a partner in the journey versus victim of the journey shifted for me.
Right. right? Because it means you're more of an engaged partner versus it
Yeah.
just taking it,
Yeah.
right? You're more of an engaged experience. You experience this in an engaged way. When we come back to your own story, what happened as you began treatments, doing intrauterine inseminations, the IUIs? What came next for you? Those things were not successful.
So we did a handful of IUIs. They were not successful. And my last I remember just breaking down in the doctor's office and realizing like this really wasn't the doctor for me.
Mm.
And so we actually switched clinics and then started to pursue what IVF would mean for us and look like. And we had no insurance coverage. My insurance coverage maxed out at $2,000 lifetime, which got me through half of my first treatment. So nowhere. And we switched practices and got ready and did our first IVF cycle. I was a little bit less of a victim already at that point in this process, but not yet the educated individual that I am, that I became
Hmm.
for my next part of this journey. And so we did a IVF cycle. We were actually very successful and got I want to say 15 embryos out of it. We transferred two and froze the rest. And that was a failed cycle. So, firstly, the language is awful. And so, as someone who didn't fail at much in life, it
Mm.
felt very personal. Like here I am failing yet again at something that's not in my control, and I'm a type A oldest daughter, so I like to be in control, and that has been a tremendous work for me that I've worked on in my own existence of letting go of control. But here it was just disastrous feeling, and I did not leave bed for a few days.
Mm.
And then we picked ourselves back up and said, listen, we have a lot more embryos. Let's try another transfer. And that's kind of where our all hell broke loose. We went in for that. I had sprained my ankle a day before, so I was on crutches. Um, and I remember like I had taken the Valium that they gave me because this time I was going to try everything at my disposal. And so acupuncture, Valium, we did it all. Um,
Valium was for the purpose of the transfer.
yeah, to help relax your body so that um, it could,
Okay.
I guess, receive. Um,
Okay. I don't think this is typical standard of care anymore, or are you
Val,
hearing it?
I mean, Valium is something that some doctors offer, some don't.
Just to relax in the procedure.
Yeah, it's
Hmm.
just to kind of bring you in a little bit
Calm your
more.
body. Okay,
Yeah.
got it.
Um, yeah, I don't know. It's what was offered to me, did not know to ask for it or not. And
Right.
it could be that that doctor is the only doctor that gives it. I don't. My
Right.
next doctor
Or
did
he
not.
noticed that you were a little bit nervous. And he
Could
was like,
be.
"Let me help you calm down and we're going to make sure she's
Yeah.
settled on the table." Got it. Okay.
Could be.
Yeah.
But whatever impact it was meant to have, it did not have because as we got into the doctor's office and we're sitting in the waiting room, we were called back and told that all of our embryos, except for what they said, two and a half, had thawed and arrested. And so here,
I want you to
whatever,
explain what that word means.
yes, sorry, they thawed and died. Essentially, they stopped in their growth pattern. And at the time, I didn't know what that meant. And so to me, again, back in my victim place, something is very, very the matter with me. I will never have children. This one thing, IVF, that I was told is the ultimate answer to anything I ever needed, failed me again.
Okay.
And therefore, yeah.
I want to just put a pause to explain something. So typically we would be defrosting one embryo at a time. Some labs will freeze two embryos in one kind of petri dish, basically, like that they're two are frozen at a time together. If you come in the morning of transfer, remember you've lined up everything, your bloods, your labs, your endometrial lighting, like everything is literally lined up just for this morning experience, usually first thing in the morning. And the lab in the morning will begin that defrost process. If in the event that the embryo does not defrost properly, they will immediately go to the next petri dish, right? The next embryo to defrost the next one because we don't have time to waste. You're primed and ready to go for transfer. What you're telling me is that they went from one to the next because all of them actually did not defrost properly.
Which I learned after the fact is scientifically not sound.
Mm.
With the current freezing process that we have, 99% of embryos should defrost in the way that they are frozen. So
Hmm.
whatever quality they were when they froze. Because we use something called vitrification, which is a fast freeze, um, they should thaw exactly as
Right.
opposed to the old version of freezing that could have had air bubbles in it, which could then lead to a
Hmm.
process like this.
But
Um,
I don't, is the number 99%? Because I have heard that there is a percentage of embryos that just do not defrost properly. It could be 99, it could be 97, 98, but there is some. I don't want to put it out there
yeah,
as like it's human error. I want to put it out
right.
there as there is a percentage. I have worked with
Yes.
women and couples who had, but it wasn't a whole series of,
No.
14 of them or 13 of them. It was one, and then the
Yes.
next one was fine, and
Right.
and whatever happened happened. But I think that just acknowledging
Sure.
that there is a little bit of a risk, very small,
Yeah.
where sometimes embryos just do not defrost properly.
100%.
Yeah,
And yet, as you said,
yeah,
statistically speaking, to lose all of them
very strange.
is yes. And so I hit what was my rock bottom. And that transfer did not work. And
Did they have anything to transfer at that day?
2.5, they
Two and a
told
half.
me.
What is
And
a half an embryo? That's
no, no,
wild.
no one knows.
No one
I
wants the
never,
half a baby. That's ridiculous. But okay, go
I
ahead.
never got the clarification. I kind of got ghosted by my doctor's office, and I
Mm,
was just too broken to go chase them. And it was in that space where we took a year off of treatment because I just couldn't. I thought that it was all my fault and that I was essentially broken and that my body would
mm.
never have children. And
How
that
many how many years were you married at this point?
um, I want to say 4, but time kind of mushes together
Yeah,
for me in
yeah.
that journey. I don't remember if it was like 3.5 years or 4.5 years, but somewhere in that space.
Mm,
No, definitely not 4.5 years. So it had to have been about somewhere between 3 and 4 years.
hmm
Um,
hmm
and we then I took that year off and I just kind of threw myself into acupuncture and herbs to try to heal my mind and my body because in that state I was not ready to even contemplate or consider um, what it would mean to start again with a new doctor. And um, it was there that the idea for Yesh Tikva actually started.
hmm
And it began just as a little support group around my dining room table with 2 other women. And I had the first Yesh Tikva fertility friend peer mentor, who's Ellie, who became the co-founder of Yesh Tikva. And it was really through that process and through the other incredible women who came together and used their professional and personal, some with personal expertise, some with professional expertise, came together and said, like, there really was nothing in our community that was doing anything for the emotional support, such wonderful other organizations that were offering financial support. And there was really, and Jewish medical ethics, but there really wasn't anything in our community that was doing anything about the emotional burden.
hmm
And so we came together and realized that this needed to change. And so it was through that process that firstly I got the benefit of having community for the first time and education for the first time. And I was starting to learn from them and from Dr. Google a little bit more about infertility and empowering myself with this knowledge of the reality of all this,
Yeah.
of that it wasn't my body that was broken, but rather a process and not a guarantee. Each IVF cycle is the hope at, not the promise of. And so
hmm
that shift helped a lot. And it was also through one of the women that I met my next doctor, who
hmm
became an incredible partner in this process. And any article I would find, I'd bring it in and I'd be like, okay, so can we try this new research? Or can we try using this extra medication? And most of the time he'd talk me down and be like, no, we just need to go basic. It could happen in the right place with the right treatment. But he explained to me why. And I think to me that was the biggest game changer was that I was treated as a partner in this
hmm
process. And a year later, we went back to do our next IVF cycle that produced what is now our incredible 9-year-old.
Wow.
Yeah.
A couple things I want to come back to. One thing I do want to acknowledge that there was another organization called A Time that was doing emotional support at that time. However, very often, several organizations that exist out in the religious world service a certain population. Perhaps it's more the Hasidic population, more Yeshivish population. And you don't necessarily, you identify that there are groups of women and men who maybe feel that that doesn't kind of speak to them directly. And so your organization was one that was more geared towards perhaps the modern Orthodox community where they might feel a little bit more connected. So I think that's always important to acknowledge that there are some organizational
For sure. Yeah.
resources that are out there, but didn't necessarily support the population in which you best identified. And perhaps in this
Yeah.
space, especially like needing to be to like see yourself in the mirror, like need to be others
Yeah.
that are in that mirror with you, that you're like, this is similar to my life experience, my language. That would be very, very helpful. Could we go to the kind of the emotional intensity of, we're talking about 4 years of time. And we jumped over the like, and all of a sudden now we're 4 years in, like there is such an emotional consequence to infertility and to not having children. I'd really like to explore, not from all the people that you hear, but just Gila. Gila, what do you remember of that time as you walk this walk of not having children?
I think that the hardest part was the loneliness. Everyone around me was having kids, whether it was their first or their third, or anywhere in between, and multiples. And here I was, friends getting married after me, having children. And I just felt, and I found out in after the fact that I even had a friend who had gone through secondary infertility and had her second in the time frame that I still hadn't had my first. And I felt like there was no one because there was no one who acknowledged it and reached out until I was 3 years in, to say, I might be off base, but I struggled with growing my family and I'm here if you want to talk. And that
Mhm.
was 3 years in was the first time that anyone even remotely acknowledged that they had experienced something similar. So it was definitely very isolating and lonely. Um, I think the hardest part was we were living in a college town of lots of young married um, individuals around our age. And so whether it was my friends or not, there was always somebody who had just had a baby.
Sure.
And so that piece was definitely very isolating and no one was talking about it. There was no yes and yes, thank God, or a religion that is so focused on building Jewish families. And that's so beautiful. And at the time, 1 in 8, now 1 in 6, couples and individuals will struggle with this. And what can we do in our community to balance both of that? And no one was saying like, we see you, this is a real struggle. And I think that for me, that was the hardest piece.
Could we acknowledge also that I think sometimes there's so much confusion around like, do I say something? Do I not say something? What's your personal guiding principle? I know mine, but like,
Yeah.
what's your guiding principle in terms of acknowledgement to someone who we don't know what people's stories are? I remember once I made a kind of a very natural mistake, assuming it was infertility, and it was something related to mental illness that they were unable at that time to continue to have children. But what are some of the things what is your guiding principle in terms of that reaching out, that engagement? If somebody either has lived experience or doesn't have lived experience, like what do you guide people? What would you have wished somebody had said to you? Because I can imagine when it comes from somebody who has lived experience, it's a little bit better. But what do you wish in those moments, if you can go back to that person that many years ago, what do you wish the world understood or your friends understood about what you were experiencing?
Um, I think the biggest problem is that I don't know that I knew
Hmm.
what I needed. And I'm not sure that one answer is the right answer from every person. Not even that like just because would have worked for me, it would work for other people, but more like just because it worked for me with this one person, would it have felt comfortable if a different person had done it?
Right.
I think that you need to know who you're talking to. If you don't know a person well, err on the side of don't say anything.
Hmm.
But if you're very close with someone, I think that being able to, especially in a text message where there's room to ignore if someone needs to because it's too painful, or even not show their emotions when they respond. Something to the gist of, I may be off base, but if I'm not, I'm here type of a message allows for room for that. It allows for
Mhm.
the room for the person to say, oh, yeah, no, we're not even trying, or wow,
Mhm.
people actually see what I'm going through.
Mhm.
And I think that, at least for me, and I can't talk for everyone, but some of us want to believe that no one's noticing.
Mhm.
We
Mhm.
want to believe on some level that like we're flying under the radar. No one knows that I'm broken.
Mhm.
And it's obviously, especially with primary infertility, um, it's so obvious to so many the longer it goes on. Um, but you don't want, or I wouldn't have wanted, a random acquaintance to have just come over and said something.
Right.
Right? It needed to be someone who I was close enough to either say, you're off base, or you're right, I can't speak about it though, or like, wow, you went through this too, I'm not alone.
Yeah. And I think that's one of the conundrums of these situations in terms of how to support somebody. You know, when somebody is sitting Shiva, it's very clear how to support them. We have very clear rules, right? We go to visit, we sit at they sit on low chairs, we sit on high chairs, we provide meals, right? It's very obvious. We have rules about how to support,
Yeah.
and we're very good at it, by the way. But when it comes to something like infertility, the experience can be so incredibly alone and isolating, and yet experienced completely in a public way in community, right? Like you said, if we live in a religious world and a religious community, the likelihood that after 4 years it was your choice not to have children is very, very low, like almost zero. And so there's got to be something wrong. But do we engage? Do we not engage? Becomes like the ongoing question of sensitivity, and also, do I invade? Do I, right? There's so much there. And I know that Yesh Tikva has some wonderful resources about, how to approach or not approach, or like what are some of the things we encourage people to say and not say. We've done quite a bit of publicity and work around that. I wonder if you can share with us a little bit more about what you remember in terms of navigating holidays and Yom Tovim and family systems. I want people to hear what you remember about those times, in addition to the lonely.
I mean, holidays obviously in Jewish religion are so focused on children, that it happens to be I have one younger sister. So in my family, it wasn't until my final year of infertility that I was preempted in having children. So in my nucleus, my immediate family until that final year, it really was a safe place to go to. There were no other children around, until um, that last Pesach, before I got pregnant. Um, but on my husband's side, there were three grandchildren born before. And I had to show up to Mother's Day, and watch my mother-in-law and sister-in-law and grandmothers-in-law receive gifts and give gifts while I just had to be the one who didn't have anyone to give that to me. And it was at the beginning, it was doable, but as time went on, I stopped showing up. I couldn't anymore. It was too big an ask to be able to sit there through that. Um, and I found Purim to be particularly difficult. I love matching themes, and to this day, we have a rule that in our family, like we pick a costume together. Everyone's a part of it because that's what it means to be a part of our family. We do this together, but like we spend from last Purim to next Purim going through themes like
Oh
until we
my.
land we're also like last minute, so like 2 weeks before then we finally order it, but like we will have had 15 themes that we are going to be for the next term, and it becomes so much a part of like family conversation, dynamic fun, like where am I going to what's it called, be mochel essentially on what
Yeah.
I want so that it works for what everyone else wants. And it's
Hmm.
it's a lesson in working together that we use.
Hmm.
And so for so long I couldn't do that. And that creative piece of me kind of felt this deep longing to be
Hmm.
a part of it. And so I wasn't able to go to regular Megillah readings. I'd go to that like really early morning one,
Sure.
and would lock myself into my house and pretend I didn't exist and not
Yeah.
to the door.
What about relationship with God? Because I think that that's something that comes up so frequently. How would you like describe or either the challenges of or the consistency in the relationship that you had with Hashem?
Um, it struggled a lot. I think that a big piece of it is that like I was taught that you ask, God answers as the relationship, and when the answer is consistently no or not now, it's and you don't necessarily have the tools to navigate the no, not now, because how do you teach that to a kid? And by the time you're old enough to really understand that process, we're not necessarily being taught it anymore.
Hmm.
And so it definitely was very challenging of like, how do I keep showing up and asking for the same thing while being told no? And to this day, I still struggle with um, the the concept of structured prayer and
Hmm.
connection to God. I kind of came out of infertility really trying to figure out my own way to connect to God. And as I had mentioned earlier, like it for me being a type A oldest girl, that really fits like that stereotype if you talk about like age order. Um, to be able to like take the step back. And so I meditate a lot in prayer, and in reminding myself that like I'm not in control and God's in control. And so that's helped a lot in kind of rebuilding that relationship of like, I don't need to be in control. The only thing I control is how I react. And so that definitely has been very freeing, and actually brought me in some ways closer than structured religion and prayer ever was able to.
Hmm. Hmm. And today, as we are kind of like as you look back on those 4 years, I mean, your story didn't end there, correct? Like in terms of building the rest of your family, how did you move from one child who is now 9 to the rest of your family?
So actually, interestingly, with unexplained infertility, there's new research being done, that spontaneous pregnancy can actually happen after a first pregnancy via treatment. And so I was blessed to have two more children, not through fertility treatments. And so now we have three beautiful kids, um, a girl and two boys, from 9, 7, and 5.
Mm.
And yeah, it just man plans and God's like, nope, got another plan for you. And so that was clearly our plan, or what not what I planned, what God intended for us, and for Yesh Tikva to be born first,
Hmm.
on this road to it. And to this day, like I firmly believe that Yesh Tikva exists by the grace of God, and as long as God believes that it's meant to exist to support others who experience infertility, we will continue to exist. And so that really is, I guess, the plan. And
Yeah, I hear you.
I'm not in control. And it's freeing not to be in control always.
I want to get back to the Ishtikva in just one more minute, but I want to know what it's like to parent from your perspective when you had to work so hard, so much money, so much time, so much emotional intensity that resulted in, after so many years, but that thank God resulted in a beautiful family. But parenting is a little bit different when you come to it a little bit more, in a more complicated way. What is that like for you?
I think it's evolved over time. I think it was very different at the beginning because it was so raw and so fresh. And I had spent so many years kind of morphing in my brain what the perfect parent would be, and what I wanted to be as a parent. And it has shifted and changed a lot since then, even. Um, and at some point, I did kind of fall into this space of overwhelmed working parent who has to juggle the whole mental load, and forgiving myself for not being the perfect parent, to understanding and learning that a good enough parent is the goal.
Mm.
And so there was a lot of guilt, in this space because I, at the beginning, didn't know how to hold the two things that were true. It is true that I fought really hard to be a parent and that I now wanted to be that perfect parent because I finally got here. And the reality that, like, there's no such thing as a perfect parent, we're human. And so trying to achieve that is just unrealistic. And parenting is overwhelming. It is, and it is okay and normal and healthy to acknowledge that especially when you have fought so hard to be here, because you don't now need to apologize for it. I remember the first time I had said something about being very tired after having um, my oldest, and someone turned to me and said, "But isn't this everything you wanted?" And
Oof, yeah.
I wish I had the words at the time to say, "Yes, and I'm a new mom. It's tiring to be a new mom. Just
Yes.
validate that."
Yes. Yes.
And I work very hard to like share that with my friends, like, and with
Absolutely.
class participants as soon as they have a child. Like, it is so important to give yourself grace.
Yeah.
Parenting is hard, regardless of how hard you fought to be here, and to put that expectation, that level of expectation on you, that your gratitude therefore means that it's supposed to cancel out the overwhelm and the exhaustion and the realities of parenting, is
It's
wrong.
unrealistic.
It's
Absolutely.
unrealistic.
I remember,
And
yeah, I remember having a conversation with somebody who, after many years of not having children, many, many years, and I said, "So tell me how you're really doing." And she was like, "Oh my God, this is so hard, and I need a full-time nurse." And she really, she's like, her whole life had to change. Like from,
yeah,
I could just run out and get a bottle of milk if I'm thirsty, and now we can go out for dinner, and now not a chance. Like I got to get a babysitter, I got to take the baby with me. Like her world changed, and after I think it was over 10 years of life without children, and she was like, "There's a major shift that had to happen." Practically as well as emotionally. And I love that idea of like be kind to yourself, be gracious, be gentle, because it is a tremendous shift. Even though you're grateful, you could be super
yeah,
grateful and super
yeah,
exhausted at the same time.
yeah.
As we wrap up our conversation, I do want you to highlight some things on Yesh Tikva, but before you do that, what are some misconceptions, let's say two misconceptions that people have about infertility that you wish people would understand better?
Ooh, two misconceptions. Um, I would start with that fertility treatments are a just. There is no just with an IUI or IVF. It is, firstly, you need to overcome the emotional hurdle of saying that this isn't how I planned my life to be. I planned on having fun, opening a bottle of wine, and being able to create the most creative pregnancy announcement to share with my family. And
Sure.
instead, I've now had to invite a doctor and a whole team of specialists into a process that was meant to be fun and romantic. And it is physically, emotionally, and financially invasive. And it is the guarantee of a chance at,
Mm,
not the promise of.
yeah.
And so that would be number one. Um, and number two is um, that infertility doesn't happen in a vacuum. When we educate ourselves about our reproductive health, we are empowered to be able to advocate for ourselves and get diagnoses and treatments and the information that we need sooner rather than later. And many of our bodies are sending us actually red flag messages that we just don't know how to read. And if we were empowered to be able to understand them and ask when they pop up, that we would actually get care that we deserve sooner and more appropriately. So I think those are the two I would
I
start
love
with.
that. I love it. All right, give me a rundown. Tell me about where Yesh Tikva is today. What kind of services do you provide?
So Yesh Tikva, we just celebrated 10 years.
Oh
Um,
my.
yes, it's started with our Live with Devoras as a single support group that was for anyone and everyone, catch all, right? Back
Incredible.
in the day, to we offer now seven different specialized regular monthly groups as well as add-ons that when they're as we get requests for them are available with incredible therapists who moderate them. Um, we have for donor conception, adoption, primary infertility, secondary infertility, men, and what's it called? We have Fertility Friends, which is a peer mentorship program that partners individuals on the other end of their journey that are trained with the help of Dvora and now Kenzie as active listeners because sometimes it's easy to get into this space of a spitting war of my journey through infertility may have been worse or better or different than yours. But when you're in the heart of it, what you really need is just someone who uses and taps into that experience to be able to understand and listen.
Hmm.
And so we have this program of active listeners called Fertility Friends Mentors. Um, and we have workshops and series on educating the community and individuals who are going through infertility, as well as their family and friends. We actually have on coming up before Father's Day, a grandparents in waiting what's it called, a panel conversation on understanding the fertility 101 because um, it's hard to know what your kids are going through when they get diagnosed, and obviously they're not the source of your knowledge. You need to find it elsewhere, and so we're here to provide that.
Wonderful.
And we have our newest resource, are our Tikva toolkits, which are these wonderful, ranging from 5 to 15 page guides that really walk you through different aspects of the fertility journey, from the emotional, mental health piece to the educational and understanding.
I love it. And I think one of the things that I know about you and appreciate about you so much is like you just identify needing to go running right after it. Like, oh, this is a population we need to serve. We're going to run and serve that population, which is fabulous. I would love to direct people to your website because I think that that Yesh Tikva has a really kind of tremendous resource and library of information. One of my favorite things that I did with you guys was developing the Tikva Talks, which was, I guess, maybe a precursor to my podcast, right? Of where I got to interview
Yeah,
some pretty amazing people and put that information out there in a public way. So
yeah.
it's always been a
And stay
privilege to be a
tuned.
part of
It's
it.
coming back.
Yes. Amazing. I'm so glad. I'm so glad. Um, Gila, thank you so much for being a part of this conversation, for making this conversation happen, for being willing to be so open and honest with everybody who is listening. And I know that this will continue to help people. So thank you.
Thank you so much for the opportunity.